Hey, Rodney. What's up?
What's happening?
So, update, diatomaceous earth.
Oh,
First one that I
DE.
ever
This is
tried.
the first stick that you
Yeah. Yeah, I tried it.
you
I'm
took
on
you
it.
took me
I'm
up
on a
on.
cycle. I'm on a 6 weeks right now. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if I'm receiving all the benefit. I'm waiting for my 90-day cycle to finish.
hmm
But my daughter calls it my dirt.
I mean, it does
So,
taste like clay.
yeah, I'm drinking my dirt in the morning. Don't breathe it in,
Don't breathe it.
but it doesn't taste like anything.
No.
At least there's that. And it's an interesting uh
It's interesting you bring
cleanse,
it
if
up.
you
I
will.
just drank
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. So I just had to provide an update on that,
Yeah.
because I
I
actually
forgot
tried
that you actually were doing that. So
your
thanks for the
stuff.
update, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good update. I'd give
DE.
more updates, but it's probably a little
You
no one
you
wants
could
to
do
hear
more
it.
updates if perhaps you followed more of my advice. And it's not really advice. It's just my
Hmm.
wackiness.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
But since you don't, you can't.
Update complete. Welcome to, or welcome back to, More in Common. This is our social experiment. See, everyone has a story that can help us learn from one another. And we bring people into this safe space that we have learned to create so we can learn about their stories and get into difficult topics that challenge us in conversation and ultimately how we think.
And we have a lot of these conversations, and we're seeing a lot of similar threads through all of them. So what we're doing is breaking down these conversations to create a set of tools and a map that'll help you become a conversation boss so that you can be a catalyst for conversation in your day-to-day life. And with all that being said, we got to send you to www.moreincommonpod.com. It's the place to go to find all things More in Common. So go check it out. And if you like an episode, share it, put it on your socials, put it on your Facebooks, send it to your friends. Sharing is caring. We like to talk about our previous episode before we get into our next episode. So our last episode was Jeff Tippett. Keith, what did you take away from the Jeff Tippett conversation?
Before we get into that, it's been a while since we've done this,
It's been a minute.
but we got this awesome review from a while ago
Oh,
that is anonymous, but is on iTunes, and says it's rare to find a podcast where honest and open conversations are had. I'm so glad I came across More in Common, and I recommend these podcasts to anyone who wants to be a part of a fulfilling and enriching conversation. So to you, Anonymous, we
Thank you.
greatly appreciate it.
wow.
And yeah, feels good. So thank
I'm
you.
not going to lie, it's a little bit of an ego boost, but it's even more so validating to what we're trying to accomplish. So that's
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. So that being said, Jeff, yeah, good question. For me, it's quite a bit actually. But so I'll crypt note it.
Mhm.
So how he openly discusses having been abused and how he has convincingly moved forward. And what I love about that in our conversation is it doesn't anchor our conversation, right? It's a matter of getting to know him, but it's not all that he is. Love how he talks about helping his daughter make her decisions about finding out more about her background, but not really tipping the scales, really just giving her the tools to make that decision. I think that is something from a parent's perspective is a really, really hard balance to strike, helping your kids make decisions without tipping the scales one way or another. And, the last thing is just communication tips, how common they are, whether you want to connect, persuade, sell. There's just so much to better connect. And many of his thoughts are so relevant to just more effective communication that we embody. So love it. Love the parallels and really just enjoyed the conversation. How about you?
Sorry, real quick. When you say convincingly moved on from like abuse, do you mean he's moved on and you don't feel like it's like he doesn't feel like he swept it under the rug? Like he's actually dealt with it and
yes,
he's in a better place?
Absolutely. Like he's actually processed it versus just, kind of saying he moved on, but then that anchored our conversation, you would question that. And I just don't, you don't feel that with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I agree with that. For me, I would say a couple things: persuasion versus the idea of selling or coercing or
manipulating.
Even. Yeah, I think it's just something I've never really thought about a whole lot, and we were forced to in my next point in deciding whether or not we were going to actually have Jeff as a guest.
Yeah.
And so part of it was like, actually don't judge a book by its cover and like really jump in. But giving him the opportunity to explain the differences and what they meant to him opened up some avenues for you and I to talk about persuasion and what it actually means, and giving him an opportunity, frankly, to speak on our podcast where we weren't really sure where it was going to go.
Yeah.
And turned out to be awesome, and it's like, all right, well, give things an opportunity. So that was one for me.
That's good. I really like that.
Yeah. So who do we got this week?
JS. Not his real name, but we're going to refer to him as JS. This was recorded quite a few months ago, so we are excited to finally bring it to you. JS is a fellow boilermaker. Boiler up. And really an all-around interesting person. He comes to us with some very unique and thought-provoking insights that definitely make us want to record an entire year of episodes. Like a lot of conversation you could have with JS. He is a musician. He's been writing, recording, and performing for about 25 years. After studying engineering at Purdue, he went on to focus his energy in a band that would actually eventually tour coast to coast. So he is currently playing the drums with a band called Crisis Actor. And he actually also maintains his micro-label and collective called Elle, E-L-L-E 2.0. That'll be in the show notes. He loves him some buffalo wings and happens to be a member of the Satanic Temple in Indiana, which definitely leads to a very interesting discussion and a better understanding of what the Satanic Temple is and how we actually all probably share quite a few of the ideals that they share. So, Rodney, that's JS. What are we talking about?
Well, and you just hit on one of the biggest things. We open with the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, we do.
And what is that? And is it related to the Church of Satan? And what's that all about? We talk about religious freedom, how he sees it, him growing up in the Catholic Church and where he is now. We even get into John Wick and some movies, which have nothing to do with the first 2 points, but we kind of go all over. He like you said, he's a fascinating guy. He's got a lot of different thoughts on things, and it was a fun conversation for me.
What strikes you about it most?
What strikes me about it most? Just so for me, it was a fun conversation. I think if I go back 10 years, it would have been a anxious conversation. Like it would have been with somebody that I haven't talked to in quite a long time, since school, getting into religion where we seemingly on the face of it have very different views. Just would have been very contentious. And for me, this was very free and open. And it was like, man, that's really, like, you got your thing, I got my thing. Oh, there's actually oddly some commonalities in it. And I could be freer and more open with it than I could have been in the past. So
good.
That's what struck me about it. What you got any tips out of it?
Yeah. I love how he doesn't explain himself or doesn't defend himself. He simply explains his position, which I think is a really good example of how to effectively disagree. as you navigate a difficult conversation, and how he speaks for himself, or he makes a strong attempt to speak for himself, not necessarily about others. And there's a point in there where, we have some disagreement about, Trump supporters. And I disagree with the position he takes. And it was a point in the dialogue to just pay attention to how that ultimately plays out. Because we do pivot away and talk a little bit about movies instead. And ultimately, it really is how you continue to maintain connection through disagreement when you're not exactly sure how you're going to navigate it going forward, which I really think is a good example in this conversation. So, but that's it. And I hope you all enjoy the show now that we've told you all about it.
I have this own rule that I never follow. That is, there's a difference between being right and doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And often me getting on there and freaking out about something, especially in the sense where I know it's going to generate that kind of traffic, that is not doing the right thing. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe dialogue is good. Not all dialogue is good. Most of it's just pointless. It's just hot air. But I mean, yeah, a lot of times, anytime I see something that's just patently bullshit, I can't pass it up. I have to say something. My biggest pet peeve in the world is insincerity. I can't just see people I can't just see something that's just so fake that it's I don't know, it makes my skin crawl. Yeah, and it's funny because in my old band, you can actually hear that progression of me just sort of being a youthful idealistic kid, and then starting kind of getting political and oh, I'm gonna take it on, and then just sort of becoming spiritually defeated. You can actually if you read the lyrics, it almost follows it.
Today we are with JS. JS, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Awesome. So right off the top, I have to ask. So you recently started your own Satanic Temple chapter, right?
Me, no. Our chapter heads, yes. Okay. Before I say a word about it, though, I have to. Well, I don't really have to do anything, but I want to mention that I am not an official spokesperson whatsoever. We have people who actually say things officially. Anything you hear is my own meandering opinion, and even though I am a member, like I said, it's just me talking. It is not an official statement by any means. Yeah, I can't obviously comment on what our official stances are. I can just tell you what I think personally.
No. Fair enough.
That makes sense.
Much appreciated.
Which would probably be a good stance for everybody on anything, just speaking from their own point of view, because instead of speaking for other people.
Yeah.
One would think, yeah.
It's one of those things that we try to draw out of people, speak
it's
for
hard.
yourself.
I catch myself doing it. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah. But of course, this is not, and I want to be very clear after having done some research, not to be confused with the Church of Satan.
Good. Yeah, that's step one.
They are different, right?
Wait. So they are very different. But the thing about it is, I say that, right? And I'm sure plenty of people listening go, what? You're a member of the Satanic Temple chapter? Tell us what that's all about for you. Obviously you're speaking for yourself, but yeah, tell us about this Satanic Temple.
Well, which part? I mean, how it differentiates from COS, the Church of Satan, or
I would just say in general, like, what's it stand for? Why are you a member of the Satanic Temple?
Or
I
yeah,
think
what does
is
it mean for
probably
you?
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
for you speaking.
Well, man, where to begin? I mean, it's like, if you were to ask anybody, what's at the root of their, religious beliefs, for lack of a better word, I don't know. We have 7 tenets, which I pulled up here just in case we have to reference them,
Yeah.
that I believe in, and the thing that I liked about it was it's sort of it's progressive in the sense that it's contradictory. Because there's sort of like a spoken culture that we have here of religious freedom, just freedom in general in this
When
country.
you say here, are you referring to the United States?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, and then we all know that there's the reality of it. I mean, basically,
if you're
the
not
government
Christian,
is
If you're not a white Christian Anglo-Saxon, then
Exactly.
you
have
are
a good
judged.
day. Peace out.
right, and like and like lots of stuff. Like one thing that we're really big on is religious plurality. Like I know people see the things in the news about the Baphomet statue, putting like a statue, a satanic statue next to the Ten Commandments, and they think, oh, it's like that's trolling. It's like, well, no, like think about it. Like you have to like actually stop and think about it. Like if we really had a country which promotes freedom of religion, why not? I mean, if you're going to have one, why not the other? And the thing is like you can't just make it like, oh, if it was a Methodist statue, for example, not picking on them. I mean, that's 2 sects of Christianity. Or if it's a Muslim statue, I mean, like still like it's still theistic. It's like, okay, well, we are the other side of things. We're not the inverse of Christianity. I don't want anybody to think that. But it's like, here's the other side of things. Like we either have everybody or nobody. That's because that's what we believe in, right? And that's where the question like usually stops for most people, and that's why the Supreme Court gets involved and all that. It's just because I mean, like if you really believe these things, like you either believe in all of it or nothing. And I mean, like it's sort of in defense of everybody, whether they want to believe it or not.
So that was one thing that shocked me because you sent us the tenets, and I was like, the first one's like one should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. And then I was like, so my question was like, well, why is the patron Satan then? Like, and I was like, isn't that a contradiction? That's a
great question. No, Satan is just a metaphor. It's not actually like nobody. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. It is not the temple's stance, as I understand it, to worship an actual Satan. And I'm going to take that a step further here in a second. But yeah, that's something that people confuse like a lot. We don't actually, well, not in like group stuff. We don't worship an actual, supernatural Satan. It's just a metaphor.
Which you said a minute ago, because you said the other religions are all theistic. So that would say that what you're talking about is not. You're not worshiping a deity.
Isn't Satanic Temple an atheistic organization?
Atheist, agnostic, free thinkers, as they call it sometimes. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. And if on a personal level, I always think theistic Satanism is kind of the funniest thing in the world because, like, first of all, well, if you actually believe in an actual supernatural Satan, then I mean, you're sort of like giving credence to the whole Bible story because it's like, well, you can't believe in supernatural Satan without supernatural Jesus. And then, like, not only that, but
true as well.
You just believed the Bible story, and then you picked the losing team. It's like, what do you? I don't. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why.
But what if it's just like, what if and I can play devil's advocate all day long, but what if it's just like maybe they don't believe that version of the story? Like, have you seen the new Karate Kid? Do you know there's a new Karate Kid series?
I know there's one I have not seen. I don't really.
With Johnny, the dude who lost. And like,
yeah,
but it retells it from his point of view. Like, this kid comes into town, starts macking on my girl, takes my girl. Like,
yeah.
I try to beat him in a karate competition. My boss is kind of a dick, but like from his point of view, it's kind of like Danielson is a dick. He comes in town and takes this dude's girlfriend. Like, yeah, I want to fight him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it, man. I don't. Okay. If you want to talk about supernatural things, like put it this way, I hesitate to tell people this because they run with it, but I'm an atheist, period. Because everything people say that God is, I, through all common sense, know can't exist. It's just ridiculous. Now, that said, I mean, of course, I have to believe in higher power because I'm not so ignorant as to think I understand all scientific forces. An example is gravity. Just use it, hear me out. Like, gravity is a force and nobody understands it. We can measure it, but nobody understands it, right? So, I mean, like, yes, I acknowledge that there is the higher power of gravity. Am I going to worship it just like people did the sun or anything else? You know, like, no, of course not. Like, I'm just going to acknowledge that I don't know and move on. And I'm definitely not going to kill people over it. And definitely not going to think I'm superior or, you know, extract money from people or exploit any. I mean, no, it's just, so yes, of course, higher powers exist. I mean, like, and I could get into like all kinds of things that like I have personal agnosticism, but that's not really, I hesitate to say that even too, because like I said, people run with it. They're like, oh, you have a bit of doubt, like you're just waiting to be saved. So fuck off. It's like just
but wait, I want to get into I don't know if you have more questions about the temple, Keith.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that, but I definitely think it's important because, you know, a lot of times, like you said, right, is people, as soon as you say atheist, which is an expression of freedom of religion, it's the expression to not follow any religion, right? Or you say Satan, there's this automatic belief that there is some evil behind the organization that you're a part of. But then you read that first tenet and you don't necessarily, I mean, maybe I'm ascribing some things and maybe I shouldn't assume, but judge other people for doing it, because that's kind of part of the tenets of the Satanic Temple, right? The use, like the description Satanic Temple causes a visceral reaction, but like you said, it's not to worship.
Oh yeah,
Satan.
you said it was more of a metaphor.
It's more of a metaphor. Yeah, it's more
absolutely is a metaphor. Right? Yeah. Yes. And yeah, I mean it okay. Like I said, there is a culture that we are told, and then there's the actual culture that's in practice. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to, like, do you know what the transubstantiation is?
No.
I was raised Catholic. Okay.
I do.
Okay. The transubstantiation means that when you go to a Catholic mass, they will actually, the wafer that they hold up actually magically turns into the body of Christ. Okay.
Right. Look, which is the difference between them and a lot of other sects. But
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most Catholics don't actually think that they're eating the body of Christ. Okay. Like I said, they don't actually believe it. And I mean, like, it's just that little iota. It's the same thing, like with the Great Flood or the creation story. I mean, there's always doubt. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like, as I see it, and this is just my opinion, like that first tenet and like starting with not the first tenet, using Satan as a metaphor just levels all the doubt. It's like, look, we're just going to pick like your bad guy, even though he's more of a metaphor for, like, as they say, the eternal rebel or whatever it is.
Hence just, the term devil's advocate, right? Like,
yeah, like just the symbol of anti-authoritarianism. And and then we just run from it from there. As I see it, again, I am not a spokesperson for the Satanic Temple, but I mean, like, that's just how I see it. It's like, you know, if we're going to, like, you know, play the supernatural game, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're Satanists. Now, let's take it from there. You know, like, I mean, I know that's a little knee-jerk, but I mean, like, at face value, that's what it ends up being for most people. And then they actually talk to me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you are a normal person."
Well, yeah,
I mean, but I think that's the important thing to talk about.
That's key, because,
right?
like, for me growing up, because, like, even Keith, when we started talking, you were like, "Oh, I'm atheist," and I was like, "Oh, I'm Christian," and like, even hearing atheist, like, my butt puckered. I'm like, "Wait, what? You're an atheist? You don't believe in God?" Like, because I grew up believing that, like, if you don't believe in God, then, like, you're going to hell and you're a terrible person. And it's like, like, if I apply a little bit more to my own thinking there, it's like, nah, like, that's not necessarily the case. And even if I do believe in God and you don't, like, who cares? Like, we can continue having a conversation.
I think the important
I definitely
thing,
don't care.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is, I mean, that's what we're all about, is breaking down and exposing that, okay, just because it says this, I mean, you're not a Satanist, you're not worshiping, you're not, you know,
But even if he
around
was,
lit
like,
Pentagon, but even if you were, like,
Right.
it would be interesting to learn more about and understand where you're coming from, because I think that's the important thing about it. So, I mean, people are always going to, prescribe their own biases based on their own religious beliefs, especially in the space that you live. But, at the end of the day, how do we break that down? And I do have one question that's, I think, really important, is the difference between the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan, Church of Satan was in 1969 established, and the Satanic Temple was only 2014, if I'm not wrong about that.
The COS has a lot of like, they're really sort of based out of like hedonism and indulgence and gratification and magic even, and just all that shit. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, I know some people might not like me saying that, but I mean, like, it just I don't know. I like to compare it to, if I may, I like to compare it to the Old Testament. Like, even though that's like a very, very crude and ignorant thing to say, I like to compare the COS to the Old Testament in the sense that you have like, like wars and like rape and like weird sacrifices and stuff. And then like Jesus come along and was like, whoa, like, I mean, I could start quoting scripture, but I mean,
let's be
like,
reasonable.
Yeah. So then the Satanic Temple is more like the New Testament. And again, that is the most wild, open for misinterpretation parallel I could possibly make.
Yeah.
But,
kind of coming back to what Rodney was saying earlier is, and you said I can quote scripture, like a lot of your current beliefs are rooted in having been exposed to other beliefs, and you grew up in Indiana. Like, like, tell us about that journey to where you are.
Did you grow up in Naptown?
No, I grew up. Well, I spent the first 2/3 of my childhood just sort of traveling around when my dad like got trained for his job, and then I ended up here in Indiana. But shortly before I went to West Lafayette. But my upbringing was Catholic. At first, I was in a Catholic school, and I don't know how I ended up being the catalyst, but eventually my parents got so fed up with that church in particular, they moved me to a public school. Then when I was 18, they tried to have me confirmed, and I started arguing with the priest about
when you say like your parents, so your parents got fed up with the Catholic Church, they moved.
Well,
they got fed up with the school or the
school, school, very specifically.
They were still associated with the church.
Yeah, we still went to church or whatever, and I went through all the sacraments. And then I was going to get confirmed when I was 18, and I started arguing with the priest about purgatory, because he said the purgatory still existed, and you'll see that some old people who are suffering on earth are still in purgatory now. And I'm just like, no, the catechism dismissed this a long time ago. And like started arguing about like stuff of that nature. And finally, I was fed up. My parents started to sort of get fed up just with me being fed up, and I got out of that. And then as I went to college, obviously my beliefs started to wane. I mean, I'm not going to fucking church when I'm at school. But I don't have to. And then more so when I got out of school. I mean, I started like really sort of dismiss the whole thing altogether. But I think it did me so much good to travel, even if it was just like to go on tour and like be like, just to both coasts, because it's different when you're like touring with a punk band, because every venue is usually in the shittiest part of town. And you're always, you sort of have to like learn to smell poverty in the sense like, or not poverty, danger. You know what I mean? Like you get that sixth sense of your surroundings, of like, oh, we're in a bad neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like that, I'm kind of thankful for now. But I mean, like just being exposed to the real world. I mean, that is more of a religious experience in an obvious non-theistic sense than I can. I mean, you have to really see how shitty things are. I mean, like I saw, like a man beat the shit out of his pregnant girlfriend, these homeless people. And like, we tried to chase the dude down, and then we went to help the woman and said, let's call the cops. She's like, no, I'm drunk. I mean, like, I know that's just like, that shouldn't be like necessarily a religious experience for anybody, but I mean, like, just there's this whole.
Well, but what do you mean by it? Like, cause you said it was like kind of a religious experience. Like, what does that mean for you?
I mean, like the whole concept of like we're going to give, a creator credit for this and not that. It's like, look, he could stop any of this. He didn't have to do that. I mean, like the whole, like the contradiction just eats at you the more you're exposed to something so terrible. or I guess in some people, like it's their path to salvation. I don't understand that. But I mean, like, I refuse to believe in a benevolent creator and this is his handiwork. It just, you know. Now, that
I have
said,
a question real quick.
Yeah.
You said you stepped in, like you saw that dude beating his pregnant girlfriend, and you tried to help her. You chased the dude down.
Well, there was a bunch of us, and everybody got involved.
Well, that's even more fascinating. I only know a little bit about sociology, but I know that groups of people don't tend to make good decisions, especially when there's something like that happening. There tends to be the onlooker effect, the gawking, like, oh man, somebody should
bystander effect.
Somebody should, bystander. Somebody should do something, and like, well, I'm assuming somebody else will, so I'm not. But y'all actually jumped in and did something. Is that part of? Is it part of you, or was it part of the group that you were with, or both?
Well, both, only because that's sort of, I would say that's the culture. I can't speak for everybody, and I know that there's a lot of times when my culture has failed me and fallen short. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like the hardcore scene and the punk scene, definitely, I was attracted to it, not because it's infallible, not because it doesn't make mistakes, but because, I mean, at least for one thing, it's not controlled by anybody. Like that's sort of like one of the ethoses.
Ethosi.
Yeah. One of the things that attracted me to it was just like, we sort of like build it from the ground up, like, okay, well, what do we actually believe in? Like, what's important to us, and that could take any number of forms. Sometimes it goes horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, it's very self-policing, very much so taking responsibility for things. And that, that's what I liked about it. And like I said, it's not infallible, but at least it's direction. It's not just saying like, okay, this is fucking good enough, whatever. Like and like you said, like in sociology, there's just like, ugh, it's like, no, there's a very strong DIY ethic, do it yourself, where, you got to take responsibility. Like, this is our space. Like, hey, don't get drunk and punch holes in the wall. Like, hey, no fights outside. Like, or in some cases, hey, we need to fight this dude outside. I mean,
right.
It could take any number of forms, but I mean, at least people give a shit. So that's
just part of the, how long have you, so in that whole journey of Catholic school, public school, confirmation, not confirmation, how long did you, I cut into it, but were you playing music along that journey?
Yeah, and it's funny because in my old band, you can actually hear that progression of like me just like sort of being like a youthful idealistic kid, and then like sort of kind of getting political and like, oh, I'm going to take it on, and then like just sort of becoming spiritually defeated. Like, you can actually, like, if you read the lyrics, like, it almost follows a very sad progression.
Do you write all the lyrics?
For my old band, yeah, and for my last band, yes. For this band, no. I just play drums, which is so nice. Mm-hmm. I just get to sit in the background and hit things.
One of the things that I'm curious about is, what was your family experience as you started to
ask questions?
Really ask questions at the period that, I mean, obviously they got frustrated and said, okay, fine, you don't have to go through your confirmation, but like now you're 18 and you're starting, it probably wasn't that smooth, and now you are part of the Satanic Temple. Like, what's your family's, how do they perceive this path for JS? I'm curious.
They don't. I mean, they're rational people. I come from a medical family, so they're all I would say like rooted in some scientific background. I mean that. So I know I laughed. I'm not like being sarcastic. Like they're rational people. So I think they know better than to fight it or to try to cast out the demons or whatever it is, the fanatical people might try to do. I've heard horror stories, man, online.
Really?
From colleagues of mine. But yeah, I mean, I would say I'm lucky to have family who wouldn't ostracize me for a innocuous benevolent belief. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of fucked up to say unto itself. Like, yeah, I'm so lucky that my family didn't disown me. It's like,
I mean,
but it's especially you're in Indiana, like, and
it's not just Indiana. I mean, that's the reason we're doing this thing in general, because in general, people can't handle having a conversation with somebody that has a view that appears to be opposite of theirs, or is opposite of theirs, or is even slightly different of theirs. And then you add the stuff that comes with family, the emotion, the baggage, the connection, and people just get even more been out of shape when it's like, oh wait, you like, you know, some families take it as, oh well, you're rejecting me, you don't like what I believe, so you're rejecting me. And it's like, no, I just,
I mean, no, man, this is an important thing I want to address real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I look publicly. You remember when I'm going to go way off the rails here? Remember when Hillary Clinton said that it's important to have a public opinion and like a private, or what, she understands that or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I mean, she got a lot of fire, whatever. I don't know what the fuck she meant by that. I don't care. I don't give a fuck about Hillary Clinton, whatever. Moving on, but taking her point there, or what so it's kind of made me chuckle, because what I totally get that. Like, for example, like, I don't care. Like when we were talking about like, oh, like, you know, an atheist versus a Christian, and they're like, oh, you know, what do I think of that? And it's like, I was like, definitely don't care. Like, look, if you want to worship whatever you want, I don't care. Like, I mean, like, don't mess with me. And like, it's that easy. It's really that easy. It's like somebody said once, like, religion would be fine if we just all admitted that we made it all up. You know what I mean? Like, Christianity, Muslim, you know, Islam, like, as long as you just admit that it's all made up, it'd be fine. Like, you know, you follow your path, and like, you know, no one has to die or get hurt or, you know, disown their family. But the point that I'm making is, while I sort of respect someone's autonomy and their whatever beliefs they want to have and their right to have those beliefs, that doesn't mean I have to like them. It just means I have to show them a certain modicum of respect in public, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the one thing I don't understand is, like, I'm obviously extremely pro LGBTQ, you know, all that stuff, you know, but at the same time, it's like, let's say, like, you think two guys making out is gross. Like, okay, just still treat them like people. Like, that, it's that simple. Like, you don't have to, like, think it's cool. Like, and if it, like, there's no such thing as a bad feeling. There's only a bad reaction. So, I mean, like, if like, it makes you feel weird, like, okay, like, have that feeling. Just understand it. Try to think about it. But at the same time, treat them like people. Understand your own bias, you know, like, and just move on. There's lots of things I don't like. I don't want to go out in public and see people's fucking Crocs, okay? But I have to. You know what I mean? I hate it. And there's so many things that I hate, like, I can't stand, you know what I mean? But I show people, like, human decency. Yeah. And that's what we've moved away from, you know? And that's why when we get into things like when someone saw the Freddie Mercury documentary and he first walked out and he's like, oh, not enough gay sex. It's like, okay, so you just minimize this amazing artist and is like, you know, like, I'm not saying you have to like, you know, his life or anything like that.
Or his music or any of it.
Don't make him a caricature. Show him the human decency to recognize his achievement and what was trying to be expressed in that movie. That's why you misstep there, my friend. You know what I mean? It's not that you have to even approve of his lifestyle. Just like acknowledge what was meant to be acknowledged. Don't reduce him to a stereotype or lampoon him as like a caricature. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense, and it is important because, like, it's not you have to like everybody, but you should have to treat everybody with respect. Like,
yeah, I mean, we're all here walking the earth trying to figure out our own formula
until they forfeit their right to respect.
Until they
that happens.
Impose it
that
upon
does happen.
you. But it's one of those things. I mean, you made the point on just accepting religion. Like, believe what you believe. Rodney and I have had this conversation for years. It's kind of the nexus of us having difficult conversations. It's like he and I look at religion very differently. And
I look at it differently from how I have my entire life. Like, I've been Catholic, I've been Christian, I've been non-denominational Christian. I've been like all over the place, and now I'm like more spiritual than I am related to any specific religion. So it's
and it's one of those things. One of the things that I've always appreciated about Rodney in every conversation we've had, whether it was about gay marriage or anything to that nature at the time, is that Rodney never used his religion to impose beliefs upon others. They were an anchor to his own identity and his own belief, and he was comfortable and confident in that, and he evolves it and does whatever he needs to do with it.
Like, I think
regardless, you never
my own understanding of things came out of it, or like my discomfort with something. Then it was like, but why am I discomfort? Why am I like two guys kissing? Like, why? Like, it made me ask the question, like, well, why am I uncomfortable with that?
But you never used it to impose it on other people.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And that's like one of the biggest things that I've always found with religion. Like, hey, it's cool. Religion at its core has benefits one way or another, as it has its equal and opposite reactions.
So earlier we asked you about tips for difficult conversation, and you said this is something that you've been, and part of the reason why I hit you up and was like, yo, we want you to come on the podcast. Like, I've seen, it was probably in the last like 2 years when you were on Facebook, like you were starting what I would qualify as interesting conversations. You were starting, by interesting, I mean, like, sometimes they were on the surface going to be divisive, or they were about something that was very much, it could have triggered people, or just could have a lot of emotion to it. However, the way in which you started it was like, this is a very welcoming, here's what I think about it. All right, go. Like, I want to know what everybody else thinks. And then you interacting with all, like, tons and tons of people interact with you, and you give takes, and you give jokes, you take jokes, and it's just this, it is a use of the Facebook machine that I've not seen many people do successfully. And I think that ties back into some of the answer you gave earlier on managing difficult conversations. And you said it's something you've been cultivating for a long time. So I would love to just kind of understand some of your framework.
And you referenced it as the whole science. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. Well, man, there's a couple of points here. I used to actually work, part of my old job was to manage our social media, and that kind of sort of drew me into more attention to it. Also, like, managing like pages for like bands and stuff. Just really kind of like, I'm not going to say it like taught me any like groundbreaking knowledge, but it at least like turned my perspective as to like, well, how can I use this in my favor, or at least how can I manipulate it, towards like conversations like really starting to like get the gears turning.
Mm-hmm. Teach us.
Well, it's just funny. I mean, like, if you ever want to like, well, first of all, you have to be good at like baiting people, like getting them into a conversation. And like, if you do that in conjunction with another post, both of those posts will get bumped in people's algorithms repeatedly. That's how Facebook works. Like, if you, like, if I put a post that says like, oh, I got a brand new puppy, and then just like people start commenting, asking about its name or whatever. And then like within the next like 10 minutes, I post like a flyer for our band, that's going to like come up in their feed much more frequently.
Because
little things like
post.
that. Yeah. Now that's a more insidious use of it. Like what I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole marketing aspect, I mean, that's just something I learned because you got to promote. But as far as actual dialogue, man, I don't know. That there's a couple of things like that's less to do with me. I mean, I have no interest in like likes or traffic aside from promotion for my entities, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like on a personal level, like attention, like I don't. That's not the goal of it.
No, and it doesn't have that feel to it at all.
Yeah, I like to like just have those conversations with people. I have a bad habit, a very bad habit, I will admit, of just not. I have this own rule that I never follow. That is, there's a difference between being right and doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And often me getting on there and freaking out about something, especially in the sense where I know it's going to like generate that kind of traffic, that is not doing the right thing. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe dialogue is good. Not all dialogue is good. Most of it's just pointless. It's just hot air. But I mean, like, yeah, a lot of times, like, anytime I see something that's just like patently bullshit, I can't pass it up. I have to say something. My biggest pet peeve in the world is insincerity. I can't just see something that's just like so fake that like it's I don't know, it makes my skin crawl. And that's usually where those things end up, is I just sort of, I kind of freak out, disassociate for a second and post something, and it goes from there, as you saw. But I mean, like, I have a good method of controlling myself. That also,
yeah. So talk about that, because I think that's
a lot of people don't.
Like, as you're talking about this is the piece. Because you freak out, you're upset, but then you engage, you listen, you read, whatever it is, and you work the process or the science of conversation. Like, how do you go from how the hell can you post that to, okay, someone's talking to me about it, let's have this conversation? Like, what is that process for you?
I'll be honest with you, man, that's not even a process. That's just me, because I've always been inherently a paranoid person, very anxious person. And I think I honestly like immediately feel guilty if I say something. I probably delete maybe 1/3 of everything I ever post because I eventually end up regretting it in some context, even if it's not regrettable. At the root of it, I don't like to upset people, even when they should be. So it was a very long process for me to be able to upset people effectively when they needed to be upset. But yeah, that's just me. I mean, like even if I'm in the moment, like I still at the end was like, fuck, well, okay, someone explain to me why this is blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like I still have to make some progress out of it, or I know I'm going to feel gross about it 2 hours later if I don't.
Do you have a natural curiosity to figure out why people think what they think simply because, I mean, maybe that's the engineer in you or the practical person? Like it seems like you might have a natural curiosity to get answers even if you don't get them.
Yes and no. I think I am interested in people that I haven't figured out. Because I've spent a lot of time like just trying to like decode and unravel people. Like in, I mean, that's half of sales, that's half of hospitality, or customer service, I should say. And I mean, like when I see people that like I can't crack, like a safe, it's like, what are you? I know that's where my curiosity really comes. I mean, there's some people who are just so batshit off the grid, off the radar. I have no interest. Like most of the Trump supporters, I have no interest in like knowing why they tick. I just know that they've like gone into a threshold of like they need to be aggressively shoved back into, some form of decency. I don't want to know how they got where they are. Well, I mean, of course I want to know to some extent, but I mean, I don't have a natural curiosity about how they fucking tick,
It's funny. I was listening to a podcast today with the sheriff in Arizona, who was talking about the wall. But like, if you had a conversation and Trump was not at all mentioned in that dialogue, you can have the dialogue itself is really, really rich and interesting. But this is what I'm curious about. But for whatever reason, once Trump's name gets mentioned, there's this inherent loyalty to justify anything he says and does, or this inherent disdain to hate anything he says and does. Even if you take that variable out and all the content is the same, there's some mutual thing. And it's just this fascinating. To me, this is what's most fascinating about that conversation. It's like, what is it that creates that for an individual in particular?
I feel like that's been there. Like, okay, take the United States president. I feel like that's always been there. Where Obama did it, it's not good. Obama did it, it's bad. Like, or it's good, it's bad. Like, I support him, I don't support him. Yeah. I feel like, and Bush and Reagan and so on and so forth. Yeah. I feel like with Trump, it is at another level.
I would agree.
Of like, oh, you support Trump? Well, like like it's at a whole nother level of, well, he's in the conversation, so the emotions seem to flare to another point. But I feel like he's fed on that and flamed.
No, totally. He capitalizes on it for sure. You've mentioned
talk about marketing. I mean, I kind of feel like what you just said, the puppy and the band post. Like,
yeah,
I kind of feel like that's how I want to sum up Trump. Like, he's kind of that puppy post and then build a wall. He's like I'm gonna make great deals, build a wall.
Well, hold up, because this is important. Like, I think the reason people, it's different. It's very, very different because you build your platform on things that you represent deliberately, and you know that you're winning over supporters on that. Like, for example, if I'm like, hey, like, I represent tacos. Who likes tacos? And we're like, yeah, fuck yeah, tacos. And then later somebody's like, well, I don't like that guy's shirt. You'd be like, well, fuck you. He likes tacos. You know what I mean? Like, okay, crude example. Now, Trump's campaign was based on things that were not even subtle, like just sexual assault. I mean, like, people just looked the other way. Blatant racism. Disastrous policy, which, look, we can argue about that. That's fine. That's a civil conversation. That's not what I'm talking about. He built
you're talking about like the racism, the anti-immigrant.
The ugliest shit. Yeah, like weird jingoistic, patriot stuff that, and a whole bunch of lies, straight up dishonesty, and like he is a,
pathological
so I'm saying
liar.
this is how he, This is how he represents himself. Now, these are real threats. That's the important thing I'm about to tie this all together with. He represents real threats, and he used them very deliberately, strategically, to build his base. Yeah. That is why people oppose any and everything he does. Like, he could do anything, like, oh, fuck him, fuck his shirt, fuck,
sure.
you know.
Yep.
Now, let's go all the way back. Now, you could say the same thing about me. It's like, well, what about you, JS? You're a Satanist. What does Satan represent? And I'm going to look at you in the face and be like, dude, it's supernatural bullshit. Nothing. He's a character in a story. And he's usually the bad guy who Rodney just said, like, you know, like, usually if you look at the other way, like in a Karate Kid show, like, you know, like, hey, there's another side of the story. Maybe you should think about the other side. Hey, my name's JS. Let's have a conversation. You know what I mean? Satan doesn't really represent anything. He's no real threat. He doesn't exist. He's a metaphor. Trump, on the other hand, I can hate everything he does, anything he does, because what he represents by his own volition and his own popularity is inherently terrible.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I think the difference is.
No, I agree with all that. What I was saying about the marketing thing is like the way he's fanned the flame of all of that, and how he's built this fire and ire in his supportership is like it is a marketing campaign from
it's an inherent manipulation of people's visceral amygdala responses to things that they've.
Oh my God! Fear. There are men coming. there are men coming in a caravan. They're gonna, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I'm totally with you. I totally agree. I think I maintain an inherent curiosity, not for the base, like, you know, people that, you know, the white nationalist base. I'm good with them, but, you know, in general, because there's an inherent curiosity to certain things that I can't get over. But
there's a weird thing with the Republican base that I can't figure out, and I don't know that I've tried to. Well, he supports most of the things that I do, so I'm okay with the stuff he's saying and doing. Like all of the senators that are like, I would never support this dude. Fast forward 4 weeks, I support Donald Trump. It's like I don't understand that.
I mean, it's similar.
I get the politics BS, but
regardless,
I don't understand how you come around on.
It's a human condition. People still go to R. Kelly shows, right? And they have for the last 20 years.
Chris Brown.
Yeah, exactly. So you've mentioned the punk culture, the punk scene in general. So
are we saying that right? Is it the punk scene? Is that the way that it's referred to by us?
Sure. No, and you're absolutely right to laugh, because I try to avoid talking about it as much as possible, because because it's not a spectator sport. It's not like it's almost like, you don't talk about Fight Club.
You're in it. If you're not, it's like Fight Club.
No, not nearly that. See, I already fucked it up. It's just the more you talk about it, it's I don't know. Somebody told me a Chinese proverb a long time ago that I don't even know if it really exists. I might have imagined this. It's like, give something a name and it starts to die.
And in all of this travel of life that you've gone to, you've created some interesting and fun. I think we're getting into a more fun zone of this conversation. Some fun opinions about. No, like from a content standpoint, like, we can talk about religion, and sometimes it's fun to talk about these heavy topics and then talk about Keanu Reeves. Like, why would Keanu Reeves be a point of topic in any of your conversations?
Any conversation, yeah.
I need to go on record here. John Wick, if the third movie holds up, it's going to be the greatest action trilogy of all time. And not only because of John Wick, but because John Wick represents something that I think you guys might not be privy to. So Keanu Reeves' career unto itself has a life. And this is when I really love art, is when it takes on like almost an unintended organism, like emerges from like the primordial soup of like the artistic work. Like, for example, Keanu Reeves, what was his first big role? Anybody?
Speed.
No. Before that.
Why am I blanking on the name?
Bill and Ted.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it was Bill and Ted.
That's right.
Shit.
Right. So think about it. Now Keanu Reeves, think about his first, is that youthful naivety, just sort of silly, like happy-go-lucky, everything's cool, right? Then the next big one that I know, now it was a series, there's only two. So then the next big one that always comes to mind with me was The Matrix. So now you have that sort of epiphany, that, that cultural awakening, that like spiritual, existential, all that stuff, and it comes to a close. And then you have John Wick. Like this next, these are just the ones that mean a lot to me.
Don't forget his time in China making all the martial arts films, becoming enlightened in a whole nother way. That's in between The Matrix and John Wick. Oh yeah.
I didn't know in real life. I'm just talking about the movies, like how the art. But then, so John Wick, like he's old, he's jaded, like his wife is dead or whatever, and he has to rediscover purpose.
Not to mention the puppy.
Yeah. Oh my God. He's trying to resolve his like past life. You know what I mean? Like integrate into his new future. I mean, it's a metaphor for an actual person's life. I mean, if you want to look at it from an unintended way, I think that's. Yeah, I love that shit, dude.
Have you? Side note to John Wick, because I really enjoyed John Wick. Have you ever seen Keanu on the shooting range training for John Wick? Badass. Like
really?
Yeah, like he did most of the stunts for that movie, and like so a lot of the shooting and the moving is him, and he does like what he does at a shooting range in real life, like whether or not you like guns, is impressive. Like he moves like a special forces soldier. It's ridiculous.
He downloaded that in The Matrix.
He did. He's like, I know kung fu. Show me.
Okay, so now you're on record about Keanu Reeves.
So now we got to get into Alien.
But what wait. But what happens if John Wick 3 doesn't live up to the bill?
Obviously, then it's not the greatest action trilogy of all time.
So that's just the only consequence. There's like no fun.
I'm not gonna like
an opposite reaction.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. What can you do? I mean, movies suck all the time.
It's fair.
Hashtag fact.
But now we're on movies.
Kind of want to know what the greatest. What is your greatest action trilogy?
Me?
Yeah.
I think I don't really have one other than that. I mean, I don't know if there is one. People have always given me their opinions, but I've never really had, Do
you have an opinion on that, Ronnie?
Not a strong one. I mean, I really enjoy Matrix, but I realize now that a lot of my takes on movies has a lot less to do with the movie than it does with where I am in my life and like what's going on in my life at the time. Like, for instance, The Lion King, or Aladdin. I love those movies. Absolutely love them.
Love them.
I think they're the best Disney movies ever.
Agreed.
But I was like 11, 12. I was in the right age group for the time, and like for the things it represented for me and my brother and my sister at the time. Like that's what I remember is really them more than the movie. So it's hard for me to say that like they still stand up the same because. So I don't know. So I think of The Matrix right away, but is it really the best? Like, did I love the ending? It was, I don't know.
Where does Alien fall into this for you, JS?
It's not really, tied into anything. It's just, like I said, I like when art sort of takes on its own form, whether, the creators like it or not. Kind of like how Natural Born Killers actually became a cultural phenomenon. I'm not pro people getting killed, but it's kind of crazy that people died because of that movie. Obviously that's a bad thing, but holy shit, that's a work of art. If there ever is one. Alien though, this is on a much more simple and pleasant level. I think it's interesting, like the name Alien. I think after you watch it and you watch the dynamic, I mean, like me with all my feminist views, if you watch the dynamic with Ripley and the rest of the crew, I think the real alien was actually Sigourney Weaver, Ellen Ripley in that movie. Because everybody treated her like the outsider, she was right the whole time, and everybody else died and she's the only survivor. I mean, she was sort of like the alien of the group, so to speak. And then for Aliens, which is Aliens 2, whatever. Who was it? It was Sigourney Weaver, it was Ripley, and it was Newt, that little girl.
The girl.
The two survivors, the only two that survived, except for that one guy, but forget him. I just thought, if you want to look at it as a feminist allegory, I thought that's sort of an interesting way to look at it too.
He's an ambassador. He's a champion. That's an interesting. Just
take. Something to think about.
So with your feminist views, what does that
mean to you? Yeah.
Because I hear people argue about feminism all the time, and which is fascinating to me. But what does it mean to you?
You kind of dropped that one in there just a little bit.
Yeah, no. I know it's kind of a loaded question. I mean, really just means, I mean, I think rather than say what it would mean to me, I guess like my advice for anybody would just be to listen more, to, just like, it's kind of like white privilege. It's like, it's always uncomfortable to like stop and be like, oh, maybe things are better for me for bad reasons. Or maybe I don't understand how I'm trampling on somebody else's day. Just stop, like admit that maybe you have a leg up, or maybe you have it better than you should, and it's not fair. Just listen. Kind of common sense with anything. It doesn't even have to be feminism. But I mean, I just thinking that since women have like historically been, if you had, like, I mean, they've always been half the population. They've been historically probably treated worse than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Just common sense. Like,
where
I can't. I don't think we can table that as common sense because they've historically been treated worse than anybody else, and like most people, I can't tell you how many times in the last 2 weeks I've been questioned on like, is white privilege real or what is it? And I think a lot of people, there's a lot of reasons for that probably, but the reason I ask what it means for you is just to understand like how you, how it, what is the word? Just how you move in that space. And you answered it beautifully. I mean, you listen more. And I think that's probably the key to a lot of things. And it's just listening more. But it's so difficult. Like, is this something that you've just kind of always been?
Yeah, where does that come from?
Maybe it's like a logical thinker on like, hey, maybe like the first time you heard somebody say like, hey man, you might have white privilege. Like, were you like, oh yeah, I can see that? Or were you?
No, I'll be honest. I mean, like a lot of people, I was resistant to it at first. I mean, like, and it had a lot to do with where I grew up. I grew up in a very, very white community. My family was like never like spoiled or like, especially like wealthy or anything. But I mean, like, I was sort of surrounded by it. And I mean, like, you'll be a product of your environment in that regard. And I mean, I'm not going to excuse people who come out of that with bigoted or just, crazy skewed views. But I guess I can understand it. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's like, I don't have a natural curiosity as to like the intricacies of a bigot's brain. But I mean, like, I can understand how it happens. But, and no, I mean, like, I was just resistant because, I mean, everything I've ever known, was like, it's like, why are people coming at me for this reason? Because I couldn't see anything around me. And like I told you, when I actually got out of the city and like drove around and stopped in every bad part of town, everywhere from coast to coast, like, you're like, oh, okay, things aren't always like that, and that's really it.
When did your feminist views start to present themselves? Like, is this always
Well, or would you say you have feminist
like,
or would you even qualify it as such?
Yeah.
See, like, I mean, that's another thing is I don't run around talking about it just because it's really not my fight. You know what I mean? It'd be like if I like, I don't like advertise myself as like supporting Black Lives Matter. Like, I don't go out of my like, well, as a supporter of BLM, I mean, like, but I do, but I mean, like, it's just like, it's not my fight. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to support, but if you sort of encroach on the actual movement, when it's not yours, then you begin to be, colonize it, so to speak, and you begin to become part of the problem unto itself. So, I mean, I don't want to like.
Can you explain that further or go into that further? Because I think this is a good point you're making, but
yes.
Can you go a layer deeper on that?
Yeah, because, okay, historically, white men have way too much of a voice. I mean, that's it. You don't have to look around that much to understand that. Yeah. And for me to, like, if I sit here and be like, oh, like, as a BLM supporter, well, what am I going to possibly say after that? Like, is it really my place to even say something? I mean, it's one thing if I'd be like, if I paraphrase someone else, or if I defer the conversation, or if I say, hey, as a BLM supporter, shut the fuck up and let them talk. You know what I mean? That's one thing. If I start spouting off my own opinion, then I become a makeshift ad hoc spokesperson for a movement that doesn't belong to me. And it's the same thing with feminism, I think. Like, if I just immediately like, oh, as a feminist, here's the way, women, blah, 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 blah. It's just like, I mean, I can say how I feel about certain issues and how I support them. I can defer the conversation. I can paraphrase. But I feel like I always, constantly, in these conversations, have to check myself to make sure that, like, I'm not talking over, because that's historically what we've even done. I think it's even important. It's important to make an effort to talk under. There's no harm in being quiet for a while.
How did you realize that?
Again, I keep wanting to say common sense. I take the time to think out all my beliefs very, very carefully, very, very carefully. Like, I make sure if I say something that I know what the fuck I'm talking about, and that's how I feel like I buy the right to be so opinionated. And I'm willing to admit I'm wrong and like concede loss, but I don't know, man. Like it's you ever seen the movie They Live?
Actually, have not. No.
Shit. Well, anyways, so the Earth gets invaded by aliens, right? And nobody can see the aliens unless you wear these special sunglasses. It's all allegorical. But so the lead character, like, he puts on these sunglasses and he can see all these regular people. They're actually like these aliens. And the billboards for like magazines, like, they actually say obey, and they say like buy things. I mean, like, they're very like stock images of them, of control.
Yeah.
And it's funny, that's actually referenced in some of my band's artwork. But it's sort of the same thing. It's like, once you're willing to put the glasses on and you actually want to look at it, it takes years and years, and it's a constantly moving process, but
right.
You just have to unravel everything. It's overwhelming at first. And like, I get so frustrated with people who don't even want to make step one. They're just like, Antifa just as bad as the Nazis. It's just like, all right, dude. Okay. Like, really? We're just, that's the level of dismissive. And that's how far you're willing to think, is like, you see two people hit each other and you assume they're the same. Okay. All right. Like, it's hard to stay amiable and diplomatic, but I do my best.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the beginning when Rodney asked you what keeps you going. You said spite. Can you expand on that?
Do you just have like a big ass chip on your shoulder?
Do I seem like it?
No, but that was your answer.
No. Well, it's sort of if I had to pick a motivation that never fails me, I mean, like, I have goals, you know what I mean? But I mean, I'm like an actual atheist. Like, I really truly believe, like, I don't just like, I didn't just philosophize something and like, and here's what hey guys, this is what I feel strong, like, I'm not like fanatical, but like, I seriously believe, like I said, I think of everything like through to its core. And I just wonder, I mean, like, like, what my purpose is here, if there is one, why I continue to be here. There was a good number of years where I think, from a combination of just like, depression and anxiety, I almost felt a resentment towards even existing. I mean, it happened without my, like, I didn't ask to be brought here. I didn't ask to like work 40 hours a week. I mean, like, I went through the whole gauntlet of like resenting like my entire existence, even with all the wonderful things that have happened in my life, like, unimaginable like blessings I have. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, no matter how upset I get or like whatever happens, how depressed I am, how far off kilter my mood is, I can always count on the fact that I know that, like, if I were to check myself out, like, other people would probably be okay with, like, happy about that. I'd be one less adversary in their world. So just like my existence unto itself, I think, being a roadblock or a bump in the road, so to speak, I think is valid enough. And, I'm not going to go anywhere based on that fact alone. That people don't want me here. Like, make sense?
Spite.
Spite, yes.
So basically, if in summary, if I were to not be here, there would be people happy that I'm not here. So for them, I'm
not
here.
going to give them that.
Yeah, it'd be like a victory, like,
Yeah, that's interesting. That's
it's a never-ending source of motivation.
Yeah, it definitly doesn't end.
It's always there. Well, and you said it always. Well, and then it's interesting because you say that, and I've heard athletes talk about it. Like, there's always somebody that doesn't believe in you. There's always somebody that doesn't want you to make it. There's always a competition to get on a team. So they like, it renews every day for them. So it's like how I got from Pee Wee to NFL or whatever. So I hear that. Yeah.
I think, Rodney, you had a question, and we are
we're getting close to time.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask. Wow, this is gonna be could be longer.
Yeah.
So
last
I'm gonna
question.
wrap.
Yeah.
I'm gonna thank you. So no, I think that's a beautiful place. Like, we have one more question. We always like to end with. But JS, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Like, it's been a road. Like, I know we've we've been talking for about a year, but good things are worth waiting for. This has been a good conversation. So really, man, thank you. Thanks for opening the kimono, sharing. And so our tagline is expose, evaluate, evolve. And so I'd like to end the conversation by asking you, how would you challenge people listening to evolve?
Just face forward. You know what I mean? Like, don't get caught up in the past. Just try to be better. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big tenet of Christianity too, is everybody's looking for absolution for their sins or whatever. I mean, but that's something that anybody can relate to. Just sort of face forward. You know, don't try to be better tomorrow than you were today.